Global supermarkets are selling shrimp that's being farmed in countries like Thailand. But little do you know, the shrimp you're eating is probably not good for you because of the conditions that it's being farmed in, or they're being farmed in. And also, the people who are peeling these shrimp are working in unsafe work conditions and aren't being paid nearly enough. Now, Thailand quickly dominated the market and now sends nearly half of its supply to the United States. The Associated Press investigated one shrimp peeling factory in Bangkok, or a number of them, I should say, and they found that one factory was enslaving dozens of workers, and all three sheds held 50 to 100 people each. Many were locked inside. The Associated Press article says the following: inside the large warehouse, toilets overflowed with feces, and the putrid smell of raw sewage wafted from an open gutter just outside the work area. Remember, this is the shrimp you're eating, okay? Young children ran barefoot through suffocating dorm rooms. Entire families labored side by side at rows of stainless steel counters piled high with tubs of shrimp. Now, if you're reading this story or you're hearing about this and you think, oh, it's probably not impacting me and the shrimp I eat, I shop at Whole Foods. Well, it turns out that this shrimp does end up at supermarkets like Whole Foods. It also ends up at Kroger. There are big restaurants like Olive Garden and Red Lobster that usually serve this type of shrimp. And again, it's probably not the healthiest shrimp if it's being peeled in a place where feces is everywhere and these people are working in unfair and unsafe conditions. It's terrible, and this is honestly what happens with a lot of the food we eat.
Yeah.
And a lot of the clothing we wear. Colin, make your point.
It is a travesty, and unfortunately, I think we're going to find out a lot more about this type of thing before we solve it, because we're living in a world that's so globalized and so interconnected. There's so many strands leading and tangling into every single rope that you see at the end of the line. You see the finished product, but you don't see those strands. And that has continued unabated without the infrastructure and the interfaces to actually know what's going on, except to the people who are at those strand levels. And so what I hope will happen is that we'll recognize this, continue to publicize it so people are aware of what's going on, and then we create systems, whether they're governmental or non-governmental, to actually go in and make sure that this doesn't happen at every step of that process, so that you can go in, take a look at where your food, where your shoes, where your oil, where your whatever's coming from, track it from beginning to end, and actually use that as a decision, use that as one metric when you're deciding what to buy.
Yeah, that's really smart. Is there anything that you consume or purchase that you know is the product of questionable labor?
I try so hard, when possible, to do like the buy local. That's not possible like 80% of the time.
Yep.
And in some countries, you're buying local, and it's local
Slave labor.
sweatshops and slave labor and things. So like, it's really disconcerting to know that things like chocolate and rubber and like really common things that occur, it's just like with the shrimp, where it's such a tangle of strands leading back to it that I'm sure I'm eating stuff and consuming stuff and buying stuff that's made by slave labor, but I have no way of knowing. And that's even more insidious in a way.
Well, there is a lack of transparency in the U.S. when it comes to a number of things we consume, including the food we eat. Look, I'm not necessarily against GMOs. I'm against companies like Monsanto because of some of their actions, right? I don't think GMOs are going to destroy us or make us unhealthy. However, it's interesting that we don't have the right to know when we're eating genetically modified foods in the U.S., right? So that's just one example of something that kind of frustrates me when there's a lack of transparency. But I agree with you. It's nearly impossible to avoid either eating or using something that's the product of slave labor. And we as consumers need to demand the information, demand the transparency, and know what we're getting ourselves into. With that said, there have been cases in the past where I knew that something I was buying was probably not a good idea to buy, but I caved. And it's usually when I buy something from like Forever 21, and I know that cheap garment was made by someone in China,
The
and
fast
they are
fashion.
not exactly the fast fashion, and there's a high price to that. And I'm doing my best to not cave. I haven't bought anything from Forever 21 in a long time.
Yeah, and the counter to that, thankfully, as we see that fast fashion thing and the equivalent in food and every other industry, we're also seeing the pushback from the other side, where for every Forever 21, there's like an Everlane where they actually show you where every dollar goes, and they show you like feeds of their factories and like relationships with the vendors. That type of thing, I think, will become more common because it actually does become a value proposition. It's something that they can sell on. I would rather buy from them, even if I saw an equivalent garment somewhere else, I'd rather pay a few more dollars for something from them because I know where it's going.
Yeah.
Whereas with a fast fashion brand, you have no idea.
You have no idea, right? And I love that you mentioned the other brands. I mean, American Apparel had its controversial issue with its former CEO, but their clothing is made in the US and it's good quality. There's Madewell. There's lots of other options out there. They're pricier, but you know, Colin has the right mindset when it comes to being a consumer. When you're going to spend that money, you know, be a minimalist, but make sure you spend the money on something that's good quality, that's going to last you, that's ethically made.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Buy less of better, basically.
Exactly, and I love that. All right, guys, tell us what you think. Comment in the section below and tell us what you think about this shrimp story. Maybe you are also guilty of buying things that you know that you shouldn't buy. We love reading your stories. So comment in the section below, and we'll see you soon.